Hello, I'm Kai Rosga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. AI is your superpower. That's how my guest today, Bryan, describes it, and it's a mindset lawyers should embrace. As the technical co-founder of Version Story, Jordan draws from his experience as a developer, seeing how technology solved a major industry pain point, collaborating on coding projects. The solution there was GitHub. With the help of his co-founder, a lawyer, he found an analog to a pain point near and dear to every lawyer's heart: version control over their documents and contracts. This was the genesis for the idea to develop the Git for lawyers. Jordan's journey provides some great lessons for both founders and lawyers. There's a great conversation about AI's impact on coding, product development, and legal practice. I hope you enjoy the episode. Jordan, welcome to Version Up.
Thanks for having me, Kai.
You are my second in-person guest, which is really exciting. We are currently, where are we right now?
We are in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, at a little co-working space called The Yard, right by McCarran Park.
And you're based out of here, right?
I am, yeah. I actually live just a couple blocks away. I've lived in Greenpoint for the past 5 years. So yeah, this is home.
And can you tell me about your background and how you got into legal tech?
Sure. So my background is I'm a software engineer. I studied computer science. I was a software engineer at LinkedIn. And while I was at LinkedIn, I met my co-founder, Kevin. Kevin started his career as a lawyer. He was an M&A lawyer at Simpson Thacher, but he was also very interested in technology. He pivoted his career after a year of being an associate, become a software engineer. And then he was a software engineer at LinkedIn, which is where we met. And we became friends, and we were both pretty interested in starting our own company, our own thing, and explored a lot of the different, problems facing the legal industry. And the one that stuck out to us is how lawyers collaborate by sending around red lines over email and keeping track of a bunch of different versions with bespoke naming conventions. We realized that the sort of collaboration problems that lawyers face are fundamentally the same problems that coders face. But the difference is that lawyers don't have Git. They don't have a proper concurrent version control system for managing the work. So once we realized that gap was present in the legal market, that's when we started building Version Story, which is our company.
And for those who don't maybe know or use Git, what is Git?
Sure. So Git is a version control system. So the way it works is if Kai and I are both coders collaborating on a code base, we will both kind of check out our own copies of the code base. And so I'll make some changes to the code base. I'll add a feature. And then once I test it out, it's ready to go. I put it up for review. I can get my colleagues to comments. And once it's approved, then I push it to the code base. So now my changes are part of the official record of the code base. And now Kai, meanwhile, who's been working off the old state of the code base, will need to pull in my changes and merge them before he can put his up for review and then commit his to the code base. And so this model allows for multiple people to be working on the same state of the code base at the same time, which is what happens in the legal industry. But the difference is that there is a system for reconciling when people make changes at the same time, reconciling merge conflicts, for understanding what the correct ordering is of your versions. So lawyers are familiar with version control from TMS products, but it solves a lot of the versioning problems that lawyers still face, even with a simple version control system.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. So in my day job, I operate on the 365 suite. And when I'm lucky, I convince someone else I'm collaborating with to use a live document. And so that live document would, for example, be on, I guess, SharePoint.
Right.
We'd be collaborating on a Word document hosted on SharePoint, and I can be logged into that document. And if they're logged in, I can see them working on the document.
Mm-hmm.
What is sort of missing in that universe or ecosystem, or what additional features or what additional capabilities come with version story that, for example, someone like me using SharePoint may not be experiencing already?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a few things. For clarity in your SharePoint system. So if you are collaborating with your colleague on the same document, presumably if, say, the counterparty sends you a new version, does that create a new document in your SharePoint? What's your workflow?
Yeah, that would definitely not be there. There is definitely no client. There's no external third-party collaboration. Let's put it that way.
Okay,
This would be
that answers yes.
this would be entirely an internal collaboration that we're doing among ourselves.
So that gets to a part of the problem for collaborative document editing, like SharePoint, like Google Docs. It can work internally when you have a few people and you're all on the same page and there's no external party. But the moment that there's an external party, the system breaks down. Like if you were to need to send a version to the counterparty and the counterparty sends you a new version back, now you need to incorporate that into your document. Well, you can't really do that to a live document. You can create a new live document, but now you have a version control issue with keeping track of all your different live documents. And then even within teams internally, problems arise when you start, like particularly in larger, like big law contexts where you're working on an M&A deal and you have several different specialists making changes collaboratively. You wouldn't really want everybody to be holding the pen on the same shared doc. Oftentimes you want your changes to be reviewed in isolation of your colleagues. You might not want all of your colleagues like watching everything you do until you're ready to share it with them. When there's this principle of version control that comes from computer science referred to as like commit atomicity. So you want your changes to be considered an atomic commit, which is like the changes are applied all at once or not at all. You want just the set of changes you're making to the document to be reviewed in isolation from your colleagues. And then when your colleague gives it the stamp of approval, it's just related to those changes. It's not also related to your other specialist who's making changes simultaneously.
I see. Yeah. And I'll tell you the other way this comes up, even within an internal team, I might be able to get the first round of edits to be all on a live document, but then inevitably a local document comes up out of the blue. I get an email and there's now a native local copy with markup, with edits. I have no idea at which point that person downloaded a local copy of what is a live document. And then now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I figure out what these edits are and how to incorporate them into this live sort of current version? Is that also
absolutely?
Kind of,
I mean, I think honestly, maybe the most classic failure mode of legal tech companies is assuming that they can get all lawyers to work inside of their product instead of Microsoft Word.
Yes.
So like maybe they have their own kind of document editor in their application, but that's just not going to happen. Like there will be somebody on the team who makes changes in Word, and then all of a sudden your system needs to reconcile them.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the key constraints of the way we've built our product from the beginning, which is recognizing that reality and being able to pull in documents from however they're drafted, whether they're, like a Word document or a client counterparty sent over a PDF redline, and we need to pull that into the system. Yeah. Like handling Microsoft Word docx files as like a constraint of your system, I think is sort of a prerequisite to meaningfully engaging with the legal tech market.
Yeah, I will say that you've identified a problem set that obviously is real and true to a lot of lawyers' existence. Everyone knows about competing drafts. It's a huge point of frustration. So that's incredible. But let me explore a little more how you've gone about identifying the problem and the solution. I think that's really interesting too, because when I normally talk to legal tech vendors or founders, often they've identified a legal sort of need that really they framed in how the problem exists in the legal world and the legal workflow, and they've come up with a solution to fix it. The way you've described this is a little different, which is you identified a problem that exists in the legal world, but it's like mapped against a problem that you have encountered as an engineer, as a coder.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to come up with a solution from your experience as an engineer or coder to solve that problem. You sort of come at it a little bit different. Normally, I hear people come at the problem from like domain expertise, meaning someone embedded deeply in what a lawyer does. You've kind of come at this in a slightly different way, which is from your domain expertise as an engineer.
Yeah. Well, I would say it took both sides of the coin. So I would not have been able to do this myself just as an engineer. My co-founder, Kevin, who is a lawyer, was critical to being able to really flesh out what the solution was. And so what I mean by that is I think I probably would have assumed prior to like getting into this problem when I was an engineer that lawyers had something like it. Like, of course, like it's obvious. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started working on it where I realized, of course, they don't. But yeah, so I mean, it's not enough for me to make the connection that lawyers are missing Git-like version control. We also had to think about how does it actually fit into the workflow? Because while there are a lot of important structural similarities between the way that coders work and the way that lawyers work, there's also important differences. So like, for example, the whole coding workflow is oriented around your next deployment. So you're writing code, you're reviewing your PRs, you're pushing changes, and eventually like the big action where it becomes real is when you deploy your code base to production. There isn't a perfect analog to what happens in the legal industry. The closest thing is you send it to a counterparty.
Yeah.
But there might be multiple external parts. Maybe you're sending it to your client. Also, there's a far fewer documents generally in a legal matter than there is in a code base. And it's also much shorter. It happens over a short period of time. So there's important similarities, but there's also important differences. So you need domain expertise in both, basically.
So from my limited understanding of GitHub, it is a platform where coders go and use, right?
Correct.
Is Version Story the same kind of idea? Is it a platform that everyone would have to get onto and use, or is it integrated, interoperable with the other things that people use in their day to day?
It's interoperable with the other things people use day to day. Another principle of how we designed the product is making it backwards compatible so that you can have the full team collaborating on Version Story, and it's great. Like, you're going to get a lot of value out of it. But it also works if just a few people do, or just one person does. If somebody, wants to stick with the workflow they're familiar with and draft in Word and send a copy over email, like it is compatible with that workflow.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. And so when you're thinking about all the developments in with how advanced the LLMs are getting and the rollout of Cloud Code and Cowork and all of these tools that are really democratizing and making it much easier to develop solutions to these legal problems, what impact is that having on how you view the product that you put out in the world? How does it impact your vision of the value that Version Story offers, and also how you go about adding features and coding additional features onto it?
Well, I think it's really exciting. If anything, it has reinforced our conviction around what we're building, because any coder who is working with these tools will tell you that version control becomes a lot more important once you have an AI agent in the mix that's making changes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to save those changes. You need to have a record of what happened. You need to be able to roll back, see the differences between of what they proposed. So we feel that the infrastructure we built, the version control platform we built, only going to become more important as these tools proliferate. So yeah, I mean, it's been a very exciting time, I'd say.
Yeah. So the agentic AI point would be that you might have an AI agent. So some sort of redlining, for example, a document that's going back and forth, maybe with a human, maybe with another agent. And so you're going to need some sort of traceability over what those changes were.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, obviously there are products on the market right now that do agentic redlining. But what happens after you make the changes to your document? Do you save them as a new version in your file system with your bespoke naming convention and you have to keep track of them all? Maybe some products will have their own kind of built-in version control system, but then what happens when the counterparty sends their redline? Is it going to be able to integrate that seamlessly? Probably not right now, because these are really hard technical problems to solve. So yeah, well, I think once you have the full comprehensive version control system in place, then a lot more becomes possible.
How do you think about the potential for legal departments or law firms developing their own sort of internal build capabilities? How do you view that as someone that's developing a legal tech product that you want to market, sell to many clients, right? Across law firms, across legal departments of large organizations. Where do you position yourself as a legal tech founder, as a legal tech builder, to essentially be able to continue to say, look, a year from now, 2 years from now, we've built something that is going to stand out and is not something that a law firm is going to just develop on their own internally?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that the version of that question can be asked for pretty much anyone in software engineering right now. And I think you have to have a specialty of something that you're focused on, that not easy, that you can't vibe code in an afternoon. That requires some deep domain expertise and can be offered as sort of infrastructure to the whole workflow. And so part of this, I think, is also imagining a world in which practice innovation teams at law firms are building a lot more internal tooling and are going to want to integrate into your infrastructure.
And so if you were thinking of an engineer or coder the same way you think about a lawyer in some ways, right? That's kind of how we started this. And you're thinking about this problem that engineers run into is a problem the lawyers run into. And so you had sort of like a engineering solution to that problem. Do you have any advice for lawyers? Because developers and engineers were the first to see the full potential of AI, right? They were the first to see the power that these tools would have. And they were the ones telling us how exciting it was way before people in sort of the knowledge economy, for a lack of a better word, really were engaging with it and seeing it yet. Now, I'll tell you, lawyers, and I think from what I can see, people in the knowledge economy more broadly are waking up to this reality. And they're seeing, what we were being told 18 months ago by people who are already experiencing it. What advice do you have for us in terms of our career development? If we're running a law firm,
Just start using the tools. So the big tools right now that are what is causing all of this stir on social media is Claude Code and OpenAI Codex, which are effectively the same thing. And they are they're branded as coding tools, which I think has understandably led many people who aren't using them on a daily basis to think that that's, what they're used for. They're for coders, but they're really general purpose. And so the reason for that is they're operating on your computer's terminal. And a terminal is an interface for using your computer, full file system of your computer, every program over command line, which is typing in commands to your computer. And like, this is just how computer interfaces were for a long time until user interfaces were invented, I believe sometime in the 80s. But fundamentally, anything you can do on a user interface, you can do on a terminal. And so the reason why Cloud Code and Codex are so powerful is that they are writing terminal commands. They are operating the full computer. So they can do anything. And so I've used Cloud Code to do non-coding tasks. Just last week, I connected it to our Amazon Web Services account as well as our analytics. And I asked build a report of like correlating our spend increases to analytics data of like how many red lines we're generating the platform. And then it was able to calculate the marginal cost of adding 100 extra users to our product. And so like that, I mean, sure, that's AWS, it's related to what we do as a tech company, but I mean, the general parameters of that problem of like pulling in a few data sources and like doing some analysis to create a report, that's like very general, right? Like plenty of people would benefit greatly from understanding how to use Cloud Code to help them with tasks like that. So yeah, I think that actually is my number one recommendation is just like learn how to use a terminal on a basic level, understand what fundamental commands are, like, play around with it, and then learn how to use Cloud Code. I'm sure there's 1,000 YouTube tutorials out there. Just start experimenting.
And if you think about the impact on your career, when I came in here today, you told me how busy you've been the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Taking these new capabilities and tools and just how iterative it has been for you, it seems like, with ideas and executing on maybe things you've already wanted to do, and now you can do quicker, easier. And you've been more busy the last few weeks. So to me, that's an incredibly powerful signal.
Yeah.
That if you embrace these tools, you don't have to be afraid of being replaced by them. You will find new opportunities and new ways to add value to the world with them. Do you agree with that kind of more optimistic take on what impact it has on people's jobs?
Yeah, for sure. And like a lot of people over the past year have been talking about Jevons paradox, which is like, as something becomes more efficient, the demand for it increases. And it's funny just like how palpably I've felt that in my work lately. It's just the opportunity cost of everything becomes so much higher when like an hour of my time is equivalent to multiple days of work from like a year ago. So yeah, like the immediate impact is I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do right now. And like all of these things I've wanted to do for years, I can just do instantly. And so I imagine part of it is novelty too. Like the major labs just released new models last week that are big step functions of a lot better. And so I'm sure there will be some kind of equilibrium, but yeah, I think once these tools are integrated into the workflow of non-coders as well, there's probably going to be some effect for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, two sort of trends that I guess I can draw from in my experience, in my career, 16 years of practicing law. And one is, yeah, things can change quickly, but then they do plateau, right? It's not, the change of pace is not always 10x. Right. Eventually it will slow. So that's, I think, one thing, if that continues to be the trend. And if we see things plateau, that will be nice because we need some breathing room, I think. But the other one is to the point you were just making as well, which is I've been through a few iterations now of technology being added into legal practice. And Every time there's a new technology, my work was up, doesn't go down. And if you ask any lawyer what impact has email had on their careers and their work load, they'll probably tell you it's increased their workload. If you ask them what impact word processing had on their workload, I bet it increased their workload. If you ask them what impact having a mobile phone adds to their workload, I think they would tell you it increases their workload. Now, along the way, some jobs get transitioned out, but you need less of a certain kind of position, maybe less of a secretarial position, maybe less of a first-year associate position. Ideally, those jobs turn into something else, and those people find other opportunities that more align with where things are going technologically. But if you think about sort of the average lawyer's experience over the course of a 15, 20-year career, you can't help but notice more technology is one trend line going up, and more work is also going up.
Yeah, you probably saw that article that was making the rounds, I think back in December, of like the alarmist piece about how like nobody's going to need lawyers anymore. They're going to be automated. And I mean, people have been saying that for years now in some fashion. And I've been meaning to get around to like writing kind of my rebuttal, which is like, I mean, largely agreeing with what you're saying, which is if you just look at, take a step back, like broader arc of history type stuff, like every technological revolution has restructured our economy in ways that increase demand for legal services. So, I mean, what happened during the Industrial Revolution? You had a bunch of new businesses form, and they needed lawyers and in-house counsel, and that led to the big law model establishing once you have these large corporations that need outside counsel. And then also, like, I mean, just a lot of restructuring happens. There's a lot of litigation, and I can very much imagine similar parallels happening now. Like, the barrier to entry of starting a business has never been lower in human history. I think it is reasonable to expect that there's going to be a lot of new businesses forming in the coming years, that a larger portion of our economy overall will be startups than it is today as a result. And all of those new companies are going to need legal services.
Yeah.
I don't think that founders are going to be completely willing to delegate the clog for all of their legal work. I think you're still going to want an actual lawyer. And there's going to be litigation as well. Like, I think there's so many interesting, thorny legal problems that are already arising with how, when the labs train on private data or deepfakes, there's going to be a lot of legal work that's going to happen in the next decade. That's for sure.
So that's one perspective on the opportunities for people to start new companies, find new ways of providing legal services. Let's go back for a minute to the ones who already are doing that. Let's take your existing law firms and the steps that they can take to start maybe evolving their legal practices to this new normal. We've already talked about the fact that Claude Code and all these tools are making programming easier. What sort of infrastructure or build out would a law firm need to pull off the kind of internal build capability that you think is necessary to be able to keep up with these developments and be able to build some of these tools internally? What do you think is like the bare minimum you need to ensure you have the security, the privacy considerations of all those things? Is there like a ideal legal tech stack?
Yeah. So I know there are already, even before the current AI revolution, plenty of big law firms that have practice innovation teams internally that have engineers on them who build products. And so those firms and those teams already have systems in place for deploying new tools onto their infrastructure for security reviews, etc. I think those firms are going to be pretty well situated because the infrastructure is there. They just need to build on it. And so for those firms, I mean, I think it probably makes sense to maybe hire a couple more software engineers, particularly some from like the traditional tech world who have had exposure to where things are going, and just, build on your existing infrastructure and start experimenting with building your own tools. The experienced engineers will know, how to deploy code, how to maintain it. And you already have the systems in place to deploy your infrastructure. So I think those firms are going to be pretty well situated for the moment. For other firms who are looking to get there, I mean, I think I guess that a sensible step for them is to kind of follow suit of what those other firms have done and maybe talk to them and learn whatever the best practices are for spinning up your own practice innovation team who has the ability to deploy tools onto firms' cloud infrastructure.
If I were in a hypothetical law firm that was on the 365 suite, let's say, can I just open up and start using Cloud Code and Cloud Cowork in a secure way?
Like in your capacity as a lawyer?
Sure. Yeah.
So there is always an inherent risk when you're using Cloud Code on your computer because it is very powerful. It has access to your terminal. It can do a lot of things. And so I think it's reasonable for firms to be reticent to have lawyers be using Cloud Code on their work computers. I think that having some kind of sandbox environment or like a test computer is a good place to start for that type of experimentation.
What does that look like?
So, I mean, if you have kind of a test, just a computer that's not your work computer, it doesn't have like your confidential legal document on it, then you could spin up Cloud Code. And I would not be concerned about that. I mean, I've never run into any actual issues with Cloud Code, like breaking my computer or anything. Like it's pretty good. But then have them play around with building whatever legal tech tool that they've always wanted. Or an even lower barrier to entry are products like Google AI Studio, which is something that Google hosts in their cloud. And all of the execution happens on their servers. And you can literally just type a prompt and it will build you an app end to end. Like I have built full-on end-to-end workflow tools that I use on a daily basis in Google AI Studio without writing a line of code. That's not going to be connected to any of your data. Maybe get some test data, some sample documents, play around with it. But like, there's nothing to be concerned about by using that from a security perspective.
As long as you don't put into it something confidential, it's not going to go and find something confidential.
Right. And so like, there's the big question, of course, of like, okay, how do you go from prototype to actually deploying the app?
Right.
I mean, I think that's a question that a lot of people are trying to figure out. As I was saying a moment ago, to me, what appears to be the straightest path forward are the law firms that have practice innovation teams that already have these systems in place. Outside of that, I mean, if people want to learn more about this and like get involved with lawyers building their tools, I'd say the community to engage with is Legal Quants, which is founded by Jamie So, who I'm sure many people are familiar with from his vibe coding lawyer LinkedIn posts that went mega viral.
He'll be on the pod in a week or two.
Oh, perfect. Tell him I say hi.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. I mean, if law firms are curious about like how to start doing this at a real level, I would recommend reaching out to Jamie, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk.
Conceptually, the idea is you have a lawyer. Let's say they have one of these, I'm going to call it a burner laptop. Maybe that's too harsh, but Essentially a laptop that's just for accessing these tools, accessing the web, not connected to your intranet, not connected to your private confidential documents. So you have this laptop, you spin up a Google Studio and develop a tool on the web-based sort of approach. Maybe you have something that's, more on laptop, but either way, create a prototype and then you just hand it off to the engineers. You have some sort of internal team that you can say, look, here's a solution, make this secure and make it so that I can start putting confidential data into it. Is that the idea?
In the short term, I think it's probably something like that. I mean, I think in the long term, I guess it will be something like that. What I imagine happens in the long term is like there just become formalized processes for these, and probably if I had to guess, I think that, I mean, I don't know how to put a timeline on it. Like, diffusion of technology economy always takes longer than engineers expect. But at some point, I would be willing to bet that most enterprises, and this could be law firms or Fortune 500 companies or whoever else who, has a private VPC running on Azure, is just going to have something like Google AI Studio as part of the core offering of the infrastructure. And like anybody from within the company or the law firm or whatever can go on and build a tool. It's sandboxed. It has tied down like network controls that the IT team administers. You have access to sample documents, but then before it can get rolled out to production and like actually deployed for more people, it needs to have some kind of like person,
Right.
IT person or engineer like approval.
Yeah.
With like some kind of code review, perhaps, although code review is kind of going away. Yeah, I think at some point in the future, I just think it will be table stakes that most organizations will be doing this, and it'll be kind of a core part of standard IT infrastructure. But until then, it could be something like lawyer builds prototype in Google AI Studio and then has it, once it's working like kind of how they want, they share it with their practice innovation team, who can then either port it over or more realistically just rebuild it themselves because it's hard to build things, and then figure out how to deploy it.
Yeah. And then there'll be some things that sort of cut across practice groups, cut across law firms, cut across sectors. And then those things are productized maybe by outside vendors. They continue to sell those products sort of in a mainstream way, which I imagine will probably still be more cost efficient than trying to build everything internally. The universe where you have a little bit of everything, right? And what I really like about that version of where we're headed is that lawyers are bubbling up these ideas kind of organically on their own. And the people who are actually using the tools are coming up with some of these use cases and solutions, as opposed to the traditional model that we've been in, where you kind of are just sitting and waiting for a legal tech vendor to come up with the idea. And they may or may not come up with it. And if they do, you're going to be like, oh, I love this, but I don't like that. And frankly, I would love to hear your perspective on this. This might actually be a better future for legal tech vendors, because I do demos all the time. I'm engaging with legal tech vendors, and I have to imagine that it's extremely frustrating to do these demos and it beats 80% of the client's requirements, and this is 20%, and then they disappear, right? And so maybe there's a future here where legal tech vendors are spinning their wheels, trying to sell the product to the wrong people or trying to sell the wrong product to their clients, and things get a little more efficient, hopefully for everyone.
I mean, I think it is impossible for me to overstate how much easier the past 5 years of this company would have been if I had access to the tools that I. Yeah, I mean, like I almost can't even think about it. It's like too painful in a way to like think about how much time I spent hitting my head against the walls with like problems that Claude could solve immediately. I mean, just to make it really concrete, and some people might not believe me when I say this, but like it really is true. So when we went through Y Combinator winter of 21, and basically that entire time we were in YC, that was 3 months, my co-founder Kevin and I were just spinning up our initial prototype for our application, which was pretty simple at the time. We were we did not have our own comparison engine, and we were licensing a third-party API, which just wasn't actually good for real legal documents, which is why we had to build our own. But anyway, so all we were doing was building a web application with like a canvas interface where you can drag your tiles around and create red lines. And we spent 3 months doing that. I am confident that I could do that in under a day.
That's incredible. And I got to tell you, for the legal audience, the lawyers listening in, find someone like Jordan, talk to them, look at them, because you are looking into the future for yourself. Like, to go back to an earlier point, this experience, this feeling you're describing, I have to assume is an experience and a feeling that we lawyers will be experiencing soon in the near future.
Yeah.
We'll have the exact same aha moment. We'll be looking into the same precipice. We'll eventually see the same light at the end of the tunnel, but there will be a moment where we will probably say, oh my goodness, I spent 10 years training as a lawyer to answer this question, and this tool just figured it out and whatever. Yeah, it's fascinating. And to me, it reinforces sort of the value of engineers and lawyers connecting and talking to each other. I think that this is a more symbiotic relationship than maybe it has been until now, and it's going to be more symbiotic.
Yep, I agree.
And I think that's really exciting. I think that's really fun. I think that if lawyers have fewer lawyers and more technologists, okay, that's a different kind of law firm. If law students, fewer of them go to law firms, but more of them go to legal tech startups, that's a different kind of career path. But to me, it doesn't necessarily feel in any way like worse or better. It feels like just different.
The way I feel just using these tools day to day is it makes me feel like I have superpowers. Like I can just do so much. And I mean, it's not even just within a work context, but just in general. Yeah, it's like my capabilities have expanded so much over the past year that it is just exciting. Like I am more excited when I start working with Bryan because of what I'm able to accomplish.
Yeah. And the thing that I'm really looking forward to, I would love to hear your sort of engineer developer perspective on this, but my observation as a user is that up until now, a lot of legal tech solutions have been focused on automation of low-level work, eliminating frictions and pain points, cost savings, efficiency. Great. There's so much room there, right? And everyone's going to benefit from that. What I have not seen is a lot of effort put into how do you provide AI to lawyers to make them super lawyers, to give them, really level them up in a way where they can give the best advice, right?
Yeah.
They can credibly tell their client, I have a better chance of winning this trial than someone else because of all this technology I use. And maybe in the near term, we're going to see more of those solutions coming, right? This sort of superpower solutions, or maybe at least these general purpose tools will give us that ability. Because as a lawyer, I love the cost savings, don't get me wrong, but I'm really excited by the super lawyer aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great discussion. Thank you for hosting me at the office.
Of course. Well, thanks for hosting me on your podcast.
This is
Fun.
great. I think Kevin, maybe that was Kevin, your
That was
co-founder.
Kevin. Yeah.
I think he
snuck in here.
snapped a picture of us as well. Be sure to post at some point. But it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks again, Kai.
Cool.